Welcome to the Empowering Industry Podcast, a production from Empowering Pumps and Equipment as the voice of the pump and related equipment industry. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Empowering Industry Podcast. I'm your host, Charli Matthews, and like every week, I'm super excited to be here. I'm glad that you're listening. If you haven't done so, please like and subscribe, all the great things that help it make it easy for our podcast to show up in your feed, but also that we know that you're following us and that we're, on track. So give us a rating and review. That's also nice. But today is really all about our interview person. So Daryl Anne, will you please introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are, what you do?
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Daryl Anne Estill. I have been in the construction industry since I was 19 years old, started out pretty young and kind of been sticking with it ever since. Love it, wouldn't change a thing. And, I'm a project manager in the commercial construction field. I specialize in mechanical and plumbing construction, done a little bit of everything from special projects to new construction to process work, owner direct, everything kind of all in between. Right now I'm focusing on multifamily commercial developments and construction, mechanical and plumbing.
Yeah, so we're leading up to AHR, and I always think about buildings and building systems when we go into that. And there's part of it is engineers, part of it's plumbers and contractors as we go into Atlanta for that event. So I was interested in that and kind of and how you tie into that, but also just interested in how you got into the industry. You said 19, so that's you've been in here for a while, and how did you know about it? I mean, at 19, I didn't have any clue that was an option for me. So,
right.
yeah.
What's so funny is I didn't know it was an option either, particularly, and I got really lucky. I was kind of at this job. It was a construction related thing, but I didn't know it was construction because I worked in the office, and the owner at the time was a landscape architect and a residential, like high-end home architect. And so I really didn't have anything to do with construction. It was really, the stuff behind the scenes. And it was a small one-person company, and he just wasn't able to sustain like long-term employees. And so I was at this place where I was looking for another job, and I wasn't out there specifically like I need to be in construction. And I happened to come across an office position with a smaller commercial finishing company. And I mean, I think I went in for my interview that was supposed to be an hour, and I stayed for 3.5 hours talking with my future boss. And by the time I got down the stairs after saying goodbye, she had ran down the stairs after me and said, "Do you want to start on Monday?" And kind of never looked back from there. And so with that, I really started on the office administration side. And within a couple years, I was project facing and doing more project facing work, being more operational, walking jobs, things like that. So that really, at 19, I started thinking I was going to be an admin kind of deal and work my way up from there, and just I took a right turn and went straight for the project. So
I love that. And I've learned so much about that role, project management, and how detail oriented that is, and like understanding the whole project is very important, and then being able to like dive down into everything that needs to get done to make sure I guess it makes sense, but if you just have never worked in that or worked with somebody like that, you don't really understand how much detail that person can take care of. And just, it's
oh,
wonderful.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. You have to simultaneously understand at all times a 360 view, very high level, holistic picture of your project, or should I say projects? We're usually running multiple projects. And you have to be able to get down into the most minute detail. You have to be able to read just everything into your drawings and plans and understand, domino effects of schedule changes and all sorts of little things, and how every little part and piece goes together. So you're anticipating, clearing roadblocks and making sure that your projects run smoothly, and that your field partners and your superintendents, who are also incredibly detailed and high level, They're your partners in your world, right? Making sure that you're clearing roadblocks for them. It's essential. It's essential to be able to be down in the weeds and up in the sky.
Yeah, and I think that's where I met you at the Empowering Women in Industry event. And I'm in the like, okay, there's a million things to do right now, and you're offering help and like just immediately know where to put yourself. Like I couldn't have told you what I needed help with, but you were like, okay, insert, I'm going to help you in this area, which was wonderful. And so I think there's part of that nature of being helpful and service to others that is in that role for sure, and just being able to see it. The other thing that I've noticed kind of and wanted to ask you about was this design build, and I think part of that um, question and why that is interesting to me because when you design, you've got to think about the other people involved. You've got to think about that
Mhm.
bigger picture. So I'm just curious about, why are you talking about that and kind of why it matters to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually really excited for this question. I love it so much, and the organization I work for is thrilled when this type of question gets asked too, because we want to put this out there as much as possible. So, design build is a specific type of delivery method. Essentially, I think historically, traditionally, we're used to the plan and spec model where the owner and the architect and the engineers, they go off and kind of design a project. The general contractor gets involved, they interpret that, pass down those documents, everyone has an opportunity to bid those documents. Um, and there's just a lot of distance, right? There's a lot of distance between the people who are actually installing the work and performing the expertise of the work being installed, and have that just foundational field practical application knowledge, to the actual design that happened sometimes a year to a year and a half to 2 years before any installation takes place. And so design build basically eliminates that distance, right? It takes the people who are on the front lines installing the work and puts them into the design part of that method. And when we close those distances, we see things like improved delivery method. We see cost and schedule growth minimized. We see unit costs go down. Relationships are built much earlier on in the process, and then they're able to be maintained well into the actual construction side. And not only that, it connects the most distanced part of the process, which is commissioning and turnover of those buildings, right? So when you're involved in the design, you're not only involved in the design and the construction, but you're also thinking ahead to how do we turn this building over? How do we get this commissioned? And how do we make sure the owner has this incredibly well thought out, successful project? But how do we make sure that their building is functional and beautiful and aesthetically pleasing and everything works and we can turn it over? And so basically, design build just takes those gaps and closes them up a little bit more. That's not to say it's perfect, right? We're all human. These systems are made up of humans, but they're not perfect. But it gets us closer to perfect, right? Or at least we like to think so, anyways.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I
Another
think
thing
anytime you can communicate more is wonderful, right?
Oh, absolutely. And communication, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. This is where we're taking, you know, uh, communication paths that usually go through so many people to travel back and forth where decisions are made. Those communication pathways are made more effective and consolidated. And people who are impacted by those decisions are in the room while they're being made, versus traditional method where we tend to be handed down answers, or we hand up questions and then we get handed down answers. Now we're really kind of sitting all in the same room, and it's a lot more collaborative. And like I said, we just see great positive impacts on the overall delivery of these projects, the values that the owners are seeing out of this. It ends up speaking for itself.
Well, I'm curious on all the different projects that you're on, and I can just imagine like, starting a design build project, and then you're going to want to continue with then that those relationships. Maybe they're building something else, and so let's continue that growth on another project. How does that work? But I guess mostly it's just, what does your day look like? How does that look like with so many different things going on?
Oh man. I'd say that's probably the hardest question to answer because it looks so different. And I think that's pretty normal for in project management, in construction, in the design build, or even the traditional delivery world. Some days like this morning, I had every intention of being at the office all day and ended up having to redirect this morning and go to site. And so as a project manager, while I'm not actually installing these things, although I have done that, I have picked up my tools and put my tape measure on. I do spend quite a bit of time in the field, and what that looks like is anything from on-site meetings to job walks to inspections to being a part of commissioning meetings and turnovers and things like that, being available and productive for customer meetings and things like that, to being a big part of the office culture here. A lot of my work is done on my double and sometimes triple screens. I would say a lot of it is just a continual project analysis, right? Anything from schedule to construction documents and plans to financials. It's just a constant churn of analyzing all of these pieces, like you said earlier, and just making sure I'm staying connected at a high level and down into the details. And so that brings me to the office sometimes as well, to be able to engage with those types of things electronically. A lot of our stuff is electronic. We do spend quite a bit of our time in our management software program. So we've got anything from, our customer engagement to our actual project management softwares that put drawings, RFIs, submittals, daily logs at our fingertips on our phones and our iPads. So we make sure that we have everything in there so that our field partners have that. And then I'm very fortunate. I work for an organization that I'm allowed to and encouraged to be a part of training. So I help train other people in our organization. I'm actually working on mentoring and training to assistant project managers right now. And then I'm also really fortunate because I get to do a lot of fun stuff like this. I went to the Empowering Women Conference in October. I'll be at the I-LinCP Women's Forum January 27th as a guest speaker, and then doing amazing fun podcast interviews. So it's really all over the place, and I absolutely love it. Like I said, wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah, I think part of it is, I mean, you're connected to so many people and like how they're successful. So you're going to be able to see that and like, that connector and mentoring part of that, because you're seeing it all and involved in so many different pieces. You have a different kind of skill set to even go into mentoring because you understand the work that these people are doing. I loved you and your company at Empowering Women. It was awesome. I never get enough time with everybody, but I'm watching, I am absorbing all of it, whether I get to talk to you or not. But I think that part of that was, being at a company that is committed to the growth, especially women in our field, in the construction field, just having role models out there so we can get more, girls and women involved in the field. I think you're doing the right thing by being active and being out there. So thank you for that. I'm just curious, like, what is that, participating in these things, but what is it really that we need to be focused on, as a whole, when we're talking about people and we're talking about empowering the people that work with us?
Sure. I think that first and foremost, you actually brought up the term earlier, is, when we have a servant mindset, right? We at TD, we have a servant leadership culture. And when we're in service of the people around us at TD, we call our coworkers partners. So when we're in service of our partners, when we view leadership through the lens of serving others and growing others and mentoring others, and when we measure ourselves as leaders, not by how well we're doing, but how well the people that we influence and inspire and mentor and grow, how well they're doing, I think it really changes how you approach pretty much anything. This is a life practice that you can take outside of work as well, but particularly at work. And I also think it's a leadership style that really suits this entire idea of empowering women or marginalized groups as well. Like, when we take ego out of the game, right? When we remove ego, when we say that we are going to measure you based on how others grow around you, you become a lot more invested with their growth, with their potential. And then when we're all doing that, we kind of all rise together. And so it's really important to keep that in mind. And then I also think something that's just, again, equally important is we can't change what we don't call out, right? We we can't make changes, we don't call things out, and we can't measure, or we can't fix what we don't measure. That's what I meant to say. So things like, being really real and vulnerable and honest about gender bias in our workplaces, in our industry, when we engage with other things, maybe outside of our specific companies, but other trades or other businesses that we engage with. There are gender biases that come with that impact women in these roles in industry. There are, we're still dealing with a gender pay disparity. There is a gender pay gap that's still rocking and rolling in the system. And there's so many things that contribute to that and factor into that. Just one I can think of off the top of my head is this thing called overlooked potential effect, where women tend to be gauged more on their demonstrated ability, whereas men tend to be promoted based on their potential. So they have a much shorter pathway to promotions, which translates to money and wealth building, and influence in their organizations, whereas women's tends to be a little bit longer. And so I think it's important to be real and have these types of conversations openly, remove the shame around them. We need to unlearn what the word professionalism means. Professionalism has kind of been weaponized to keep us from speaking out on platforms like LinkedIn. This is a professional network. We don't talk about things like that here. We want to talk about business only. So when you say you want to talk about business only, we're kind of removing women's ability to empower each other. We're removing those conversations from the very public. We don't just get to remove half of our humanity when we step into the workplace or we step onto a job site. It's there with us. It comes with us, whether it's publicized or not. So unlearning, the weaponized version of professionalism, being able to speak out and remove the shame and stigma around these conversations, knowing that the only goal is not to take away from, anybody else. It's simply meant to empower a group or multiple groups. And by helping one, we help all kind of deal. So
Yeah.
I feel like I took the long way around on that.
I love
answer,
that.
but
I absolutely love that. And I think it's important. A lot of the things, I mean, I could go into each one of those things that you said
yeah.
for a while, but I do love that we do need to be human. Okay. We're humans and we need to be able to have conversations, and that's how we grow. Otherwise we're just going to do the same old thing, and we're not going to solve some of these problems because they are just hidden, or we don't know that they're problems really, right? Some people don't even
Absolutely.
see them.
Right.
I know that, there's so much that we can talk about, but I'll just kind of give you the floor. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover, and then leave our listeners with?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that's really important to me being in construction and talking about being in construction, not only as a woman, but anybody in construction or in industry, is mental health. Our industry tends to lead the way in suicides, unfortunately. And so just that alone on paper indicates that, it's a conversation we need to have more and more vocally. Again, going back to my statement about removing the shame and stigma around having those conversations. I just this year personally gave a public interview about my mental health journey, and that was big and scary, but it's out there now for the world to see on my LinkedIn. And that was just my one small contribution to see if it helped just one person feel a little bit more safe in their existence in what we do. Then I felt like it was worth every bit of my anxiety and worry over it. And then I think I mentioned it earlier too, specifically about what is just encouraging the conversations still around emotional, psychological, and physical safety, and making sure that we empower women with the language that they can use in order to have those conversations when they feel like any of that is violated or crossed. That's another thing. A lot of times, when you don't have the language and you don't feel safe or comfortable, it's easier to distance yourself from those conversations, or just put up with it, or quit and leave and go somewhere else. And so empowering women with the voice of accountability is another big thing. I think, I'd love to leave folks with is we need to be having these tougher conversations and learning the language to put a name to it so we can change it.
Yeah. And I think that some of these things are just talking about it and getting it to where you know what to say. I mean, a lot of the things, around empowering women, it was like, why are you empowering women? And I had to just know, like, it's important. That's my answer. If I feel like this is okay, this is somebody's testing me or whatever. And
Yeah.
they, I'm like, I don't even really want to have this conversation because you probably aren't going to understand. But what is
Right.
my response to that? And my response is it's important. And therefore I don't have to get into a, frustrated state or anything. I can
Right.
just stay in my truth. And so there's some things with that. There's some setting boundaries, right? And like understanding where
Oh,
your boundary is,
huge. Yeah.
that can help with that. And just know, like, that's really unacceptable for me. And if you don't know what's unacceptable for you, then how can somebody else really honor that? And so getting
Mhm.
women to kind of, and this is harder for us because we, a lot of the times we have that like pleasing nature. We want everyone to,
Sure.
be approved or like us, is one of the things. And I think men have that trait as well. But traditionally, we are in that
Sure.
pleasing mode. Um, and so looking forward, having conversations and having resources out there and getting people together, and having that safe space, to be psychologically safe within your organization allows for a lot of this stuff to at least, the difference between personal life and work life, that professional life, there is a way to have conversations that are respectful for everyone, and,
Absolutely.
and necessary. And necessary.
Necessary. Yes, absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
thank you so much for your time. I am excited to just follow your journey. But I do want to just pick
Thank
your brain a
you.
little bit with a little rapid fire, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So, I always start with a book. Do you have a favorite book?
Oh my gosh, I have so many.
Okay.
I actually did a reading challenge last year, and my goal was to read 75 books, and I made it to 63. So
Pretty good.
I'd
Pretty good.
say from a from a professional standpoint, last year I had a couple books that stuck with me, and I ended up reading twice. One was the Brene Brown, I think it was Dare to Lead, and then Michelle wrote The Wake Up, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging based. And I have a follow up to that with a book written by Lily Zhang that I can't. It's sitting on my desk right now, and of course I blanked.
You can see it. You just can't
Um,
remember it.
I can visualize it,
Yes.
but yeah, they wrote a fantastic book about practical applications of DE&I efforts in a professional world. And Michelle wrote this wonderful book about kind of understanding the more emotional experiences of different identities and folks like that. So it was a great partnering. But yeah, I'd say Dare to Lead by Brene Brown and The Wake Up by Michelle were, my top two from last year. I read them twice and they're on my shelf right now.
I love it. So part of this that we just get to know that you are a book reader, and then we also get
Yes.
some resources. And I love learning about new books. So, the next question is songs. Favorite song, favorite band, anything like that.
Oh, okay. So this is for my kiddos. I say that, but it's also totally for me too. So we have kind of a tradition that maybe not every year, but every couple years, we try and see 21 Pilots when they're on tour. We saw them a couple years back, and it was one of our favorite concerts. And so every time our new album is released, we all as a family listen to the music, and then we get prepped to go to their concert. So I'd say collectively 21 Pilots and going to see them live. But if you're just talking me and my life partner, Sean, we really enjoy more rock and more heavy rock. So last year, when concerts were kind of becoming more of a thing again after COVID, we went, and I mean, we went back to back. I think we saw a Five Finger Death Punch, Rob Zombie. I mean, we even saw Megadeth. It was really fun to kind of get back out there. We love going to see live music too. So I'd
Yes.
say, and I listen to everything, anything from classical jazz to hard rock.
I love it. And Becca, I remember her on our team. She was so excited to get back to a concert because that is her.
Yes,
That's her happy place, if you will. So,
absolutely.
okay, not really last, but best advice that you've ever received.
Oh, let's see. I think I think I've got a couple. The first one that comes to my mind is learning the art of assuming goodwill. Um, I think it's really easy, especially now, especially with the rise of social media, especially with the rise of just having access to everyone, even professionally. I think it's really easy to assume people's intentions and take things really personally, really quickly, or to hold on to that personalization of whatever you think was happening. And the further I go on the journey of learning to assume goodwill, that that person probably didn't mean to be harmful or hurtful. And it actually allowed and opened up space to be able to have better conversations because I wasn't so worried about how personally hurt I was. I was able to put myself in their shoes a little bit, create some shared humanity, and then be able to say, hey, I don't think you meant that, but let's talk about it because there was a boundary that got crossed. And it actually allows for that defense, kind of that immediate defense wall to come down between both people. So I'd say when I was kind of introduced to the idea of and the art of learning to assume goodwill, that was one. And then the speaking of boundaries, the other biggest, goes for personal and professional, when somebody explained that a boundary was not meant to stop the other person, because I cannot control what the other person does. When I set a boundary, it is meant to control my actions and behavior. So an example is a misconstrued boundary is you're not allowed to talk to me that way. That's not a boundary. A boundary is if you talk to me that way, I will leave the room. I can control my actions. I can't control theirs. So just that simple mindset shift changed so much about how I learned to set boundaries for myself. And then I kind of was able to move through and away from kind of that crushing reality that I felt like I was violating so many of my own boundaries because I was setting them wrong. And now I'm able to keep small promises and hold my own boundaries a lot better. And that builds my own confidence up with keeping promises to myself and understanding that a little bit better.
Those are really great. And now it's your opportunity to give advice to others. What would you tell somebody coming into the construction industry?
Ooh, that's a really good one too. Okay. And I have two partners that just started on my team. That one is fresh out of college, been working with us for 6 months. One is still in school, but they came from the military, family, their mom, so they have a little bit of that life experience, but they're new to the industry. And so a couple things that I shared with them is what we do is hard, but what everyone does is hard, right? It's all just varying degrees of hard, and it's how we set up boundaries and stuff like that and go about being organized that helps us move through that hard. And in every job, but in construction in particular, there are seasons. There are going to be seasons that could be a couple weeks long, and then you're out of that season. And then there's seasons that could be 6 months. And what I mean by that is sometimes we're going to have to push through and we're going to have to work a lot of hours because our role owes this project these services to make the project successful. And so sometimes that looks like working 60 or 65 hours a week, sometimes 70, or coming in on a weekend. But there's going to be seasons where our project is in a really good place and we're able to take a breath and we're able to say, okay, I've got everything I need to get done to make this project successful this week, done really quickly and really well. And you'll have a chance to leave early. And so sometimes you get stuck in that season where you feel like it's never going to end and it's as hard as it's ever been and it's going to stay that way and won't change. And so I try and lay that foundation really early on that there's always that light, that season will end, and there are going to be moments where we have room to take a breath. And then on the flip side of that, similarly to what we tell new moms, right, is nap when the baby's napping and take care of yourself. Same thing. When those moments do come, when you can take a breath or you can leave early, take them. 100% take them. That is a boundary I encourage them to set very early on because the season will start where you won't have that opportunity. It's very different than just traditional, 8 to 5 in the office. We have peaks and valleys. And so just setting that foundation early on, I think is really helpful for folks coming into the industry. And then I'd say networking is huge. And I don't just mean like go to a bunch of networking events, learn the art of networking, learn how to be very intentional with networking. Talking to 1,000 people looks great on paper when you check all those, I talked to 1,000 people, I've got 1,000 check marks. But being very strategic and aligning yourself with people who are already very good at being intentional with networking, and kind of following their lead, is just it's gonna help you so much. And then I think people also, when we say networking, they only think externally, network outside of your organization. I would say I highly encourage people to network within their organizations as well, depending on the size. Get to know people from all departments, all levels of leadership. Make friends as you can, because, like I said, I started at TD in one role, and I've had many since then. And I've been very fortunate to know so many different people and have their support and love and kindness and caring. And, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those great relationships. So network inside, network outside, and then just be very intentional with your time, your seasons, your boundaries, all that fun stuff.
I love it. Daryl Anne, I knew this was going to be an amazing interview. I was looking forward to it. And I would just encourage people, if your network looks like just like you, get out there and add some people into there, search out, find other organizations so you can include people, because you're really going to grow. That diverse network is key. I think it's one of the best things that I have on my list as far as what I
Absolutely.
have, that diverse network. I love it so much. But spend some quality time with people. Like, make that list
Absolutely.
and put it on your calendar. I love that, and it's gonna be so good for people. So thank you again for your time, sharing your
Thank
story.
you.
And we'll definitely put in the show notes a little about you and how you can, and everybody can kind of go back and hear your story that you've published as well. But if anything comes up, y'all let me know. So thank you for the interview. Thank you all for listening. And we'll be back next Monday at same time, some place, whenever you are comfortable listening. We're on your phones, hopefully. And until then, be empowering.